miles for plenty of missions, and that rumble is still really loud, even when you're like 40, 45 miles. You have a really long delay, but you listen closely and you can still hear that rumble. So it's going to be a great show.
Yeah, and if anyone ever wants to go out and see a launch, there are very few bad viewing spots, I think is the best way to put it, along the Space Coast there.
Yeah.
But if you want to know exactly where, we have a video on this YouTube channel of how to view a rocket launch and where are some of those secret best spots. Which we do have a second camera at one of the exact spots that we mentioned in that video. Down near Jetty Park is where Max Evans is currently located. So we will have Max E tracking the launch of Maxar.
Okay, that was good.
Thank you.
I'll give you credit for that one.
Thank you, I'll take it. I'm surprised I didn't get yelled at by Max for that one. Here's a good one. JS Web Productions. Speaking of Maxar satellites here, what are the benefits of having this view of Earth? So basically, what do these satellites do?
Yeah, these are Earth imaging satellites, and there's a bunch of other people out there that might want to have images of the ground. Like there are many applications. This, for example, even has infrared because it has a multispectral camera, which means it looks in different bands of the electromagnetic wavelengths, and so you can see things that you may not be able to see under other wavelengths. For example, in near infrared, you can spot fires. For example, you can look at crops growing over time, over the year. So it is very useful for a lot of applications like that, where you really need to keep track of things from space that you will not be able to do otherwise. Like if you have a very big field, for example, of crops, it's really complicated to do it, aerially, with planes and things like that, especially if it's, very big expense for governments, for example, to keep in check things like droughts and, fires in forests and things like that. Like you have a lot of those things where if you can see a large patch of land in one go with these high resolution images, then you're able to see a lot of information, get a lot of information out of that.
So be part of that nice big constellation. And there's a whole bunch of different constellations that work on viewing the Earth. But it's kind of nice to see that some of them are at different zoom lengths. So sometimes you want the 30 centimeters, sometimes you want the much wider angle view to get a bigger picture. And I mean, that's one of the best ways to keep studying our planet is to see it from above and then continue to watch and monitor the changes over time. Just based off of, Mother Nature, the way the planet is, humans' impact on it. So all of these Earth-observing ones I feel like are really cool.
And you have lots of other, for example, tomorrow on the Transporter 11, there's going to be a bunch of planet satellites, for example, a bunch of I think there's another couple of them from Umbra, for example. They use SAR, synthetic aperture radar, where instead of looking in optical wavelengths, you have radar instead. So it's sort of like, what it sounds like. You just pass a band of radar over the ground and you get a signal back and you can read it after a bunch of computing and everything, right? And so you can get a different kind of image, and you can get that during the night, which you cannot do with optical wavelengths, or even if there are clouds, for example. So there are multiple ways to be able to gather information. Sometimes it is used for military purposes as well. Like there are governments that actually ask for this for military purposes, but there are others, like even journalists are using these satellites to be able to investigate things happening in certain bad places, right? Like that sort of stories that we hear sometimes. And so it's really interesting that, these things are being used in many, many different ways.
Absolutely. Adrian in the back channel mentioning some of the recent wildfires in the Mediterranean are also being tracked with satellites.
And that helps people on the ground precisely, to coordinate how to attack those fires and put them out.
Exactly. Speaking of putting out fires, Falcon 9 will hopefully be putting out fire in about 6 minutes from now. At T-minus 7 minutes, we had hit the engine chill milestone. D, why do they chill down the Merlin engines?
So it is the same sort of thing that, for the reasoning that we have the vent for the second stage, they, rather than thermally shocking the engines by throwing these cool propellants into them, they cool them down, because otherwise metals will contract, and that can lead to bad things and hard starts and all sorts of things that are beyond my comprehension, honestly.
Pretty much the same as the T-minus 20-minute vent, right? Because you have a lot of cold things flowing through something that is at ambient temperature. You really don't want that thing to crack or boil off suddenly, that liquid oxygen, and then turning it into like a gas explosion or something like that. You really don't want that. So you cool it down a little bit before you flow all of that through whatever thing, right? In the T-minus 20-minute vent is the T, and in the Merlin engine chill is the Merlin pumps.
There we go. And in terms of other preparations that are now happening for launch, as we hit the 4.5 minute mark, should be the retraction of the transporter erector, the strongback. That is a little bit blocked right now by the crew tower from this view, but it's a metallic structure that has lines that help feed not only fuels, but also electrical and air conditioning, essentially, keeping the environment inside. The satellite's where it needs to be, and you can see those clamps have opened, and it is retracted 1.8 degrees away. It will throw back completely at T-minus 0. And it's cool to actually see some of that venting there coming. It looks almost like it's coming out from the fairing halves, from underneath them.
Yeah, there are two vents that are sort of like 180 degrees at the top of the liquid oxygen tank, and it's super cool to see that. See, there you go. You see both vents there. Yep.
Also interesting to note, the fairing, they look very clean. SpaceX does sometimes recover the fairing halves. Are they planning on recovering these?
Yeah, I believe, though, even though they look new, I think they're used, but not heavily used. So that's why they kind of look new. But yeah, they're going to be recovered by Bob out there in the Atlantic Ocean.
And there you go. As we pass the T-minus 3 minute mark for those just joining, this is the Falcon 9 at Space Launch Complex 40, Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida, set to launch the WorldView Legion 3 and 4 satellites for Maxar as part of a 6-satellite constellation. This one will be launching towards the northeast, and then the first stage will come back to land, back on land, an RTLS mission at LZ-1, also on Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. Coming up on 2 minutes now, and fuel loading should be wrapping up, right?
Yeah, the first stage is completely loaded with propellants. They are wrapping up liquid oxygen load on the second stage. Just a few seconds, we're going to have that. And then we're going to see the TE vent coming back, because they drain back all of the remaining liquid oxygen on the line. And so that clears the line to be able to lift off safely. And I just heard a call out that liquid oxygen load is complete on the second stage. And there you go. That's the return of the vent.
There we go. The second best vent. With that final line purge, a very good indication things remain on track. So what we're going to be keeping an eye out for now in the next 90 seconds is at T-minus 1 minute. We should hear that Falcon 9 has entered startup, meaning the onboard computers take control of the count. That's also when all of the tanks pressurize to their flight levels. At T-minus 45 seconds is when the launch director will hopefully give the go for launch. and then continue counting down until about 3 seconds before launch, when they use something called T-Teb, which usually produces a green flash to help ignite those 9 Merlin 1D engines, and then that should lead to liftoff at T0.
We are in startup now.
There we go. We have that confirmation. Falcon 9 has control of majority of everything going on with the count right now. Next, we should
Go for launch.
There we go. We have the go for launch. We are now about 30 seconds away from liftoff. And just a reminder there that we will stop talking after it lifts off as the sound gets ready, so you'll be able to hear the launch. And as we see D giving a final rocket blessing, as we call it, moving the heads on the tripod, checking that it's ready to move and ready to roll in about 5 seconds. Keep an eye out for that ignition. There's ignition and liftoff. Liftoff of the 200th Falcon 9 from Slick 40 with WorldView Legions 3 and 4. And it's that rumbling continuing there as Falcon 9 passes through max Q, maximum aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle. And you can see that plume spread of those 9 engines as we get into the thinner parts of the atmosphere. Fantastic view there.
It's so crazy, the angle of attack there of the rocket.
Really is. And I believe this might be our view from Max, who is located south of the launch site.
Should be coming up on Miko very shortly.
Yep, the 3 events in rapid succession. Miko, as you mentioned, main engine cutoff. That will be followed by the separation of the first and second stages. That will then be followed by the ignition of the second stage, what's known as SES-1, second engine start 1. And then, yes, there we will have the boost back burn. You can see it flipping right there.
No, it's not a stubby. What? That's
Hallelujah.
good. I was thinking it was going to be a stubby nozzle today.
Nope, not today, but we have that flip maneuver for that return to launch site. Gotta love that flip there. Flip and burn. That is so cool. Again, the first stage now working its way back to just a few miles away from where it took off.
Now, coming up on the fairing separation here.
We should hopefully get a view of those WorldView satellites.
Yep.
Depending on SpaceX getting video view.
Poof.
And there we go, in slideshow format. Yes, as you mentioned earlier, those 2 fairing halves will be
And
recovered to hopefully be flown again.
yep. And that's boost back shutdown.
In that boost back, steering it backwards in a way towards LZ-1 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. So then the next burn is the typical entry burn, which happens about 6.5 minutes into flight. So still got about 2 minutes until that one. You can see the cold gas jet thrusters making those small little adjustments as it returns back.
I always like this part where the booster now has to go the other way because it's going now back, so it needs to turn. And you can see the Earth underneath. This is amazing. Look at
On the
that.
right side of the screen there, it looks like that is actually a ground tracking view almost.
Of the booster.
Yeah, of stage 1.
You know, it's funny that they decided to fly this mission with a full nozzle. I'm not complaining though, because I like it. I don't like the stubby nozzle on the MVAC engine, but it's curious because on the Vandenberg launch, they decided to fly a stubby nozzle, and from here, they decided to not do that. I guess they probably like the full nozzle better.
I wanted a stubby nozzle.
Well,
Yeah.
we won. The people with a good taste won today.
Well,
I'm staring up into the sun, trying to look for the booster ahead of entry burn.
how was the launch, though, by the way, while we have you?
That was really, really good. The sound lasted quite a while. I repositioned one of my cameras already to be in the general direction of landing, and I'm just staring up at the sun. The sun is not in the ideal location for beautiful entry shots today.
Yeah, that is probably the hardest part with an RTLS mission, if you've ever seen one, is, especially in the daylight, it just disappears. It goes up, it blends in, and then you kind of have to wait until that entry burn to reacquire it, and then try and track it all the way down while not blinding yourself.
Should be coming up on that entry burn shortly.
Yep. Again, there's a slight discrepancy between
There it
our...
is.
Oh, there we go. We have that burn. Beautiful views there. And if you see a discrepancy between our clock and their clock, there is a slight delay on the feed coming from SpaceX, but still, gorgeous views of that entry burn. And that looks like entry burn shutdown. The coastline of the Cape coming back into view on the left side of the screen there. So the next thing will be the landing burn. And that will begin in about 20-30 seconds from now, and hopefully touch down safely at LZ-1. So let's keep our eyes out for that. You'll notice the grid fins start to actually move a lot more now that it's in the thicker part of the atmosphere. You can see the skid strip at the Cape there from that onboard view. And there's our view. There is the booster coming down. We have that landing burn. Keep an eye out for landing leg deploy. And... there's the sonic booms.
There it is. That was
Beautiful.
a nice landing.
Hearing the engine roar as well, as the booster successfully touches down on LZ-1. There we go, another successful launch for B-1076. Meanwhile, second stage should be cutting off any moment.
There it is.
Just as I say so, there we go. That looked pretty darn good.
So something neat about that set of sonic booms from reentry is because Max is so much closer, of course he heard it sooner, but even with like the transmission, I even heard the sonic boom in my headset before I heard it in person.
That's wild.
So you got treated then to
Double sonic booms?
sonic booms, essentially.
It's a Falcon Heavy.
And did you get the VAB squeal as well from the landing?
Honestly, I was with my headset on, I wasn't noticing that.
Gotcha. Well, that so far, everything looking good. You can see there on the screen the plan track for that. The next burn that is scheduled for this one is about 47 minutes into flight. Excuse me, not burn. The next event is about 47 minutes into flight when WorldView Legion 3 will be deployed, and then 1 hour later, after that, is when the fourth WorldView Legion satellite is set to be deployed. We are working on hopefully getting some replays for you. As you can see, those satellites there, by the way, exposed to space. I do want to thank someone where it's not showing up with any name in our panel, but thank them for becoming a Red Team member. Max, I don't know if you are on comms, but if we could hear it from you, I'd love to hear your audio, your thoughts during that.
How do you guys hear me?
I hear you.
So I had my AirPods in the whole time, just to keep an eye on you guys, obviously, and also just to keep an ear on comms. But the audio for launch was super crisp. It was coming right through the noise cancellation on my AirPods. Super crisp audio from here during launch, and then also the sonic booms also kind of gave us a good old slap in the face as they normally do on the way down. I had the booster for a while after stage separation, and I got a little bit frustrated because as I was tracking it backwards and the RCS thrusters were doing their thing, the HDMI cable that goes from the camera to my screen basically said no and stopped transmitting, so I lost it. Very frustrating. I was hoping to track the booster all the way from stage sep all the way to entry burn and landing. But we still got it for landing. Oh, and here comes the Coast Guard chopper about to buzz us here at Jetty Park. I'm not sure if you can hear that.
Oh, I hear something.
And that is a helicopter. But yeah, that was a wonderful viewing, a wonderful launch experience here from Cape Canaveral today.
And speaking of hearing, we hear you in the chat, and I do want to apologize for the ads that appeared for many of you just after liftoff. We did not have any control over that. That was YouTube that decided to auto-run said ads. We do everything in our power to try and avoid them happening at key mission milestones, especially at liftoff. So just want to apologize to everyone for that. We do have replays coming, so if you did miss it, stick around, you'll get to see all of the different views as well. But thank you everyone for your patience with that. And then, as mentioned, the no-named member, thank you for becoming a Red Team member. And I don't know how to read Cyrillic, but thank you as well for becoming a PadRat member. Alright. Let's see here. We should have some more questions here that we didn't get to answer prior to launch. Khaled asking, why don't they perform a burn to circularize the orbit, or is it already?
That is a great question. So on the SpaceX timeline, it doesn't show anything about another burn after this. But then the map, when we're looking at it, you could see that the final orbit, because the final orbit is like in gray, the planned orbit is in gray, the blue orbit is essentially the current one. So you could see that currently the second stage is following the planned trajectory, but afterwards you can see that there's like a higher orbit, so to speak, later down the line. So it kind of shows that they're going to be doing another burn. So I don't know, maybe the timeline is wrong or something. I don't know. But we should expect perhaps another burn, I should say. Maybe that's the discrepancy, like why one satellite is like 40 something minutes and then the other one is a bunch of other minutes. I don't know. Yeah. Sometimes when SpaceX's timelines are not completely up to spec, kind of confuses us because of these things.
Yeah, that each mission is different, which is a good thing in its own way. But yeah, sometimes that can lead to different burn times. I think we're also at this point just so used to Starlinks with the the SES-1 and SES-2.
Meanwhile, they're lifting that Falcon 9, as you can see there from. I think that's just read the instructions.
A shortfall gravitas.
Okay. Yeah, because I don't see the Marmac number.
Yeah, that should be a shortfall of gravitas that just returned. It's the beautiful sunrise behind it yesterday morning.
Yeah. Oh, right. Yeah, the other one is just read the instructions. I now see. It actually has the octograbber garage open. You can see the door open, and the octograbber right next to it.
So we see all the recoveries happening typically, from the drone ship. We see them come back into port and things like that. What's the process for basically lowering and returning the Falcon 9 once it's at LZ-1?
Yeah, that's a great question. So they have a different team, because it's not the same team. Obviously, if it was the same team, then they will have a problem. It's a different team that actually goes out there, and they have another crane as well. It's a mobile crane. Well, this one is also mobile, but you know what I mean, right? It's not as more like that one is just for the Cape for Port Canaveral, but then they have other cranes, and they also use the same sort of method of having that sort of cap on top, and the wires that go down and help retract the landing legs. And they have a stand both here at the port and also out there at the landing sites at landing zone 1 and 2. They have two different stands as well. Because obviously when you have a Falcon Heavy, you have two boosters, and so you need two stands, one for each of the landing pads. So they put those boosters on the stands, they process them, they close the legs and everything, and then they use another crane to be able to put it horizontal. And it's essentially very similar operations, but instead of being on a drone ship, you just essentially lift it on a stand. Like you just essentially grab it from where it is on the landing zone and just put it on the stand in a different fashion than here. But at the end of the day, it's very similar operations.
Yeah, no octograbber needed.
Yep, no octograbber needed.